All right. So at this stage, I want to introduce our speakers. In fact, we are so privileged, I must say, because prior to now, we always used to have only one speaker who would come and, talk to us about how to prepare for ICSAN exams, what to expect. But graciously, today we're having not one, but two, and not just any kind of speakers. These are distinguished tutors who have cut their teeth in mentoring and tutoring students through their ICSAN journey. So I count this session, people who have connected to this session, you're so privileged. I wish I had access to this in my own time. I probably maybe would have come out with a distinction. But regardless, I'm glad that we're able to offer value for you today. So I'll start with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Mrs. Ibiene Pamela Mbano. She's a legal practitioner with over 30 years post-call experience. She has a master's degree in public law at the University of Lagos. She's actively in corporate practice in the academics. She currently works as the Director of Civil Litigation at the Rivers State Ministry of Justice. She's the coordinator of one of the ICSAN approved training centers. So if you are connecting from anywhere in Nigeria and you're looking for a training center, if you go to the ICSAN website, there's a list of training centers that are approved by the institute. So our training center is one of those ones. And she is well-versed as a facilitator in the subject matter of corporate administration. And she's been doing this since 2011. So she's obviously a member of the institute. She's also a member of the Institute she's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Administrators and also a member of the Society for Corporate Governance. So when it comes to administration, the Institute has changed the name of CA to Corporate Administration and Risk Management. So she is like the plug for everything you need to do about corporate management, corporate administration. So we're lucky that we're having that, especially for those who are writing CA or you intend to write it in the future. You have an opportunity to ask all the questions you can or get more insight generally about the Institute's exams and specifically about corporate administration. Our second speaker is Mr. Obinna Nwagweze. He serves as the principal partner at Nweze & Co. He's a very, will I say experienced, because I mean, if someone who's worked across several companies in Nigeria, not just any kind of companies, but agencies, very significant institutions in the country. He's very, very versed with knowledge about corporate governance, board dynamics as a result of his experience. And beyond honing his skills in corporate governance, he's also now a tutor in corporate governance and board dynamics, and he's been doing this for over 5 years. So he's also a tutor in the study center that is run by Mrs. Mbano. So we're going to be leveraging from his wealth of experience, and he graciously would also be sharing tips on how to, write corporate governance exams. And if you have any specific questions, possibly you've been studying and there's an area that you were struggling with in corporate governance, he's graciously told us that he will be able to answer some of those questions. So bring them on board, and we're hoping during the Q&A sessions, we'll be able to ask more questions and gain more value. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to yield the floor to Mrs. Mbano. She would start the session by sharing some of those tips. As a very seasoned tutor, there are some frequent mistakes students make in the course of preparing for the exams and even writing the exams. So she's going to be talking us through all of that, and then setting the tone on how you should approach ICSAN exams, some things you need to do, how you need to prepare, and then furthermore, if you have questions in the area of corporate administration, you'll be able to take them as well. And then we'll bring Mr. Obinna on board to also take his session. At the end of their sessions, we'll have an open floor for Q&A, and we'll wrap up the session. So let's be conscious of time so that we would maximize every value that we can get from this session. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides now, and Mrs. Mbano, please feel free to unmute, and you can put on your camera if you can, and you take over the floor. Thank you. And welcome once again. If you just joined, please introduce yourself in the chat box. Tell us your name, where you're connecting from, the courses you're currently preparing to write or you intend to write in the future. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Celine. I'm so excited about this journey. I appreciate the community. Well done. Thank you very much for this opportunity. So I will be talking about preparation for your exam, the mistakes, the strategy. I believe in strategy. Incidentally, my father is a grandfather of strategy, and he says that for you to succeed in life, you must know the strategy. So you don't just go ahead reading and reading without having a pattern, and that is what Celine has brought to us today. So I'm going to talk to us about 3 stages of our study. I try to create what I call 3 stages: the preparation stage, the pre-exam stage, and the exam stage. That's my formulation, but I think that will work for us. So the preparation stage. In the preparation stage, we have to start reading early. There are people who pride themselves that they have never failed the exam, but ICSAN usually surprises them that they can actually fail. I say, have you ever failed? I've never failed an exam. But you can fail the ICSAN exam quite easily, because first of all, the pass mark is 50 for those who have never taken it before. So the preparation stage is that you start reading in time. You put in the hours. If you are doing self-study, then you have to map out your own timing. If you're in a class, which I recommend, if you're in a lecture center, then you try and participate very well with them. So you make sure that you cover the syllabus. It's not like this, they say AOC, areas of concentration, like Celine said. You just have to cover the syllabus. If you don't cover the syllabus, you'll find yourself surprised that a question can come that has 3 children, A, B, C, and they are different topics, and you read only one, and you see that you can't answer the rest. And how do you get your 50 marks if you don't prepare properly? So you read through, and then you start trying to answer the question, past question papers immediately. If you go to the ICSAN liaison office, whichever state you are, they have past questions. Those are gold nuggets. You just have to use them. That's the secret to passing ICSAN exam. Practice, practice, practice. So if you read a topic, you pick that past question paper, scan through for questions on that area, and start to practice them immediately. If you wait till a month to the exam, you will have fever, because you will find that all the things you have been reading, that when you go through the past question there, you just have hazy answers. So there are some of the questions that have already been answered by ICSAN already. The institute has already answered them. So you could go for those ones too, so that you see how the questions are answered and see the areas of focus. You will see that there are some small things that you did not think was important. Like in administration, they will ask you, what does culture play in information or in communication in the corporate world? What does culture, what has culture got to do? You see that there's only 2 lines of that thing you'll find in your notes. You need to learn to expand it. Secondly, you have to be informed. It's not just about reading the book. You have to listen to news. You listen to BBC News, you listen to Sky News, so that you know about what is happening. At one of the summits of ICSAN, those who will back the past question period, they were saying that once there's an emerging trend in the world or in the country, within 6 months, those issues must be part of the exam. So you won't say they didn't teach us this, they didn't teach us that. What are the emerging trends these days? Right now, we know about the new minimum wage, and we know that it's now, there's a law that is backing up the new minimum wage. It's not about talking, 70,000, yes, Tinubu did that, Tinubu did that. As a potential corporate administrator and secretary, what do you know about the new minimum wage? What is the law? What does the law say? Is there any way you can enforce that law? So outside the syllabus, you look for things that are emerging. So if you are reading human resource management, you look at this new minimum wage and what the law is saying and what people are saying about it. What are the prospects of this new minimum wage? Who are those it applies to? What kind of organizations should comply with it? So outside the syllabus, outside your notes, outside your cramming, listen to news. I can't emphasize this because you're going to see a lot of such questions, and I call them bonus questions because if you can answer it, you will pass so easily. So in this preparation stage, as you're reading, you're listening to news, you're trying to find out what is happening in the nation on that, those issues in the course you're reading for. And that is how that there's no way the question will come that you won't have something to write. If you're current, there's no way you will not have something to write about because you've been listening to the news. So at this, the next stage is, so like another topical issue you could look at the artificial intelligence. That's what is topical now. We could look at intellectual property as it applies to artificial intelligence. I'm talking about corporate administration, in the area of corporate administration. So in whatever course you're doing, you look at what is topical and try and add it to your study. As you're reading, you're asking yourself questions of things that are happening in your society all around you. Then in the pre-exam stage, you start to practice how to manage your time. Because it's 3 hours. Section A, those who have been answering and those who have done the exam will know. But for those who have never done it, you have section A and B. Section A to J, 10 questions. Section B, 6 questions of which you choose 3. And 5 questions of which you choose 3. Section A is compulsory. In the section A, is short, punchy answers. Short, punchy answers. When I say short and punchy, you just hit it, the point. They ask you a question, you start going in. Some of my students, you start going the historical analysis of, you don't need those histories. When they ask you a question, you answer it 4, 5 lines, 4 lines is done for that section A of half your page at most. You go and answer 3 pages for a question in section A, you're preparing yourself, you're shooting yourself in the leg because you can't get more than 4 marks for that thing you're writing. You cannot get more than 4 marks for that lecture you're giving your examiner. So you keep those large analytical, descriptive, and historical, even historical is not too, unless they ask you for history, which they don't too often do. They don't do it much. Maybe occasionally in governance, they could talk about that. Or maybe pension, you want to compare an old law with a new law, but it's not so common. Read your question very well and answer. Now, I'm talking at the pre-exam stage because that is where you learn to begin to read your question thoroughly and know how to answer it. And allot time to yourself and tell yourself that within 45 minutes, it's 1 hour, but within 45 minutes, you have finished. You can skim and scan and see whether you did it well. Then you move to the next one. So allot time. If you don't finish, then you're rooting yourself for failure because you should attempt all questions. So this preparations, this pre-exam stage is is very key. Also, in this pre-exam exam stage, you should allot time for reading. You tell yourself that every day you put in 3 hours. And so you can put in an hour and a half in the morning before you go to work. And then when you come back from work, you can just unwind a bit and put in another 1.5, and you're putting 3 hours daily. You should also learn how to make short notes. For lawyers, we have that practice where we make very tiny notes we make tiny notes, voluminous though, because I think that thing we are doing is wrong. Voluminous notes with tiny handwriting and fill up the whole place. But the kind of notes I'm talking about that you make should also be short and punchy, just keywords here and there. I tell people, don't buy 40 leaves and don't let your notes exceed that 40 leaves. By the time you can compress your notes into 40 leaves, that means you really understand the subject matter. And so that's the kind of preparation I'm talking about. So in choosing your now exam stage, you need to be healthy. There are people who like to take a lot of coffee. Be careful, because of the reaction. Try to get 7 hours sleep on the exam day so that you don't have crisis. Now that day, that is when you're going to put in practice the time management that I'm talking about. First of all, you choose your questions. Now, when you are choosing your questions, you have to be sure that whatever question you choose, that if it has maybe sub 1, 2, 3, that's at least you know a little of the 3. So if you have to choose between the 2 questions where you know 2A, you know it so well, but B and C you don't know at all. Or the other one, 3 A, B, C, you just have a small ideas. I rather you go for the one you have small ideas. And if you have been current, listening to your news, your BBC news, corporate world news, you must have something to write. And try and write. I tell my students, write with bravado. That's the expression I use. It's my personal expression. Writing with bravado means that even though you don't know it well, use good language, use good handwriting, sound elated and enthusiastic about what you are talking about. Use grammar and punch in things. You see yourself getting marks. Don't leave it empty or do only that one you crammed so much, 2A, and leave the rest. How are you going to get your 50 marks? You may not be able to get your 50 marks. So that is what you do. Now, another thing I missed in talking about preparation stage is the use of mnemonics. The use of mnemonics. The use of mnemonics, that is when you have very numerous things to memorize, and there are many. Like when we're talking like in a corporate administration, talking about infringement of copyright. What are the offenses involved? Section 25 of the Copyright Act. There are so many. So I came up with a mnemonic for my students. It could be anything. It could be anything, but you just put it in brackets around that topic so that in exam, once that comes, you put the mnemonic down. It could be anything, ECI, it could be data, it could be anything. High court to the power 2. There was one of my students who gave me one, high court to the power 2 and all that. And so use those to help you to remember. I think I've covered the scope of how to prepare. I think I'm done. Sally? I think I've done. Hello?
Yes, I can hear you, madam.
Yes, I think.
So,
I think
I was hoping
that's
you
my
could.
2 cents.
Yes, you can
Yes?
speak a little bit about the exam scenario itself.
Scenario.
What to expect, how people can prepare. Some people have never written the exams before, or they are just trying to get to know more about the exams. So if you can speak typically about okay, time to arrive. How is the exam
Okay.
typically conducted, really?
Oh, okay. Time to arrive. Okay, the exam starts for the morning paper. It starts by 9. Am I right, Celine?
Yes,
The
yes,
morning
you are.
paper. Yes. 9 to 12. So you should be there. You should be there by 8 at most. You don't want to come in panting to the hall. Actually, sorry, Celine, I thought it was a given. Nobody should come to an exam hall sweating. Then secondly, come with your writing materials. Don't come with one biro. Come with like 4 biros. You don't want to start battling with biros when you have more battles before you. Come with, if possible, if you can afford it, come with 2 calculators. If you're doing a corporate financial management, because the truth is that anything can go wrong in the hall where you now have to start. But those things can actually make you fail when you are harassed by small things instead of preserving your energies and your mind for offloading all that you have studied over the months. And so that's basically how to prepare for how to be in the exam hall, to come early enough and then be ready with all your physical arsenals, while hopefully what is in your brain is stable enough and ready to come out. Have I done justice to what you wanted?
Okay, thank you so much, madam. I think you've actually spent over 15 minutes. So we
Sorry.
could step down your conversation now and have Mr. Obina come on board while our participants are probably thinking through some questions they may have for you during the Q&A session. So if there's anything she's highlighted that stands out, or you probably want her to dip in, just note it down. When we have the open floor for Q&A, you have an opportunity to ask her for that question. So at this point, we will just invite Mr. Obina. I saw you joined. And please just unmute, and if you want to put on your camera, we're happy to see your face. All right, Mr. Obina, you have the floor. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you,
Good
Celine.
evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Mbano, and everyone on this call. Really appreciate your presence. I see 23 participants. Mrs. Mbano has basically covered quite a lot of things with regards to preparation. There's something I have noticed when it comes to students writing corporate governance. There's a tendency for students, if they tend to try to stick to the syllabus or the material available, and Mrs. Mbano has, pointed that most aptly, trying to stick to the syllabus, the material provided can be extremely dangerous, because you'll be limiting yourself. Because with corporate governance, questions are asked and you're expected to think like a governance professional. So it's not basic university. If you've written an examination for master's or PhD, you find out that you're expected to go beyond the material you have at your disposal. So you're expected to read wide. You're expected to take note and cognizance of happenings around you. And, we've seen this play out in some questions that the Institute asks, especially with corporate governance. Sometimes people look at questions and it appears as if they've been blindsided or they've been thrown a curveball, and they're wondering, whoa, we didn't come across this. And that's it. It underscores the importance of, especially from this moment, if you have not done so, from this moment, the importance of past question papers. Because when you come across past question papers, there's a tendency you're going to come across questions that you probably have not come across, or even if you come across it, you probably won't have an idea of how to deal with it. And I think one of those, okay, there's one I have here where they talked about coronavirus and sustainability. You know, how coronavirus affect, let me get the question here. Yes, about coronavirus and sustainability. Now, the effects
Mr.
of,
Bina, sorry to
yes, please.
disrupt you. Maybe you can just reference the year and the past question. So I'm sure some people can go back and have a look at it as well. Thank you.
Okay, it's June 2020 and coronavirus sustainability. And when you look at a question like that, most times people would be thinking about just the sustainability issue, but you need to link it with the question you've been asked. And sometimes it throws a lot of people off balance. There are other questions that come across and you need to think outside of the box. And that's why you probably need to read wide. You need to be abreast of what is going on in the profession. You need to go through past question papers and try to answer as many as possible, because there's a tendency for questions to repeat themselves. And if you're fortunate and you come across a question that repeats itself, of course, it makes it so much the easier for you. Then she's touched on the issue of strategy. And when you come across the Section 8 questions, you probably find situations where you have list, state, and then once in a while they tell you to list and explain. But of course, they require very short explanations. You're not expected to unburden everything you have at your disposal, because you have 10 questions, 4 marks, 40 marks, and you're expected to, if you have 3 hours, so you're expected to deal with those max 45 minutes. And with proper preparation, when you see questions, you know that you can attend these questions. Once you have come across a question that you're not too sure about, please move on to the next one. Don't waste your time dawdling on questions you're not too certain about. Do as much as is humanly possible, try to take care of the questions you're definitely sure about. Later, you can backtrack, come back to those ones, and then give it a bit more time, because time is of the essence. There's no point dwelling on questions and then leaving the ones like in section B, you're talking about 60 marks that you're going to answer 3 questions. Each question carries 20 marks. And like Mrs. Mbano explained, in one question, you might find A, B, C, and they're from different parts of corporate governance. They're from different parts entirely. So if you're not prepared, you know A, you don't know B, you don't know C, that's a major limitation for that particular question. So, and you're not sure you will get, if it's a question, maybe the A, out of 20 marks, you're thinking about just 8 marks. It means there are 12 marks on the table that you've not been able to make the most of. Of course, that reduces the possibility of your being able to pass, decently well or getting very good grades. So your preparation, your mindset, you need to be sure of what you're there for. And I keep telling people that we get to lecture at the center, it's not important to me that you are able to memorize or cram. No, you need to be able to think these things through, because governance is living. So you must be able to identify with each and every aspect of it. The use of mnemonics, wonderful, especially in like their key areas. I keep telling students, if you don't have at your fingertips the key issues in corporate governance, then there's no way you'll be able to address corporate governance questions, because every question you meet deals with a key issue in corporate governance. So if you have these at your fingertips, you have the basic concepts in corporate governance. Then in some other areas, when you have the mnemonics and you're able to have those at your fingertips, it helps you, it makes it a lot easier. In these exams, there's always a tendency when you start and you probably come across 1 or 2 things you're not too sure of. You want to panic. You need to calm down. You have 3 hours. Take the first 5-10 minutes to settle down, go through the questions, formulate a strategy. You need to determine how you want to address the questions and how, the amount of time you intend to allot to each question, so that you have a definite strategy and you're not left holding the bag at the end of the day with nothing to show for it. I think also that especially with respect to governance, that covering all bases, with public governance, with not-for-profit, there's a tendency right now that questions will come from these areas, maybe not on their own, maybe with other questions from other areas. So you need to cover all bases. There are no areas of concentration. You just need to cover. But like I said, if you pay attention to a lot of past question papers, you find out that the institute has a tendency to, lean favorably in certain areas. And you can pay attention to those areas without leaving all the others aside. So I think basically these are some of the things you'd need to. But at this point, I'd like to advise everyone, from this moment, you should be thinking more of dealing with past question papers as much as is possible. It will help at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Obina. Thank you for sharing those very succinct points. At this stage, I want to first ask if you have a question so that we can do it in an orderly manner. Just use the raise hand icon. I'm going through the comments. I see quite a number of people are doing corporate administration and corporate governance. So if you're here and you are writing the exams that our speakers already are very seasoned tutors in, if I were you, I would just go and grab my book. If there's any area that I've been studying and struggling with, this is your chance to get free tutoring. Okay, so I've seen a lot of people who are writing CA and CG in December. So if there's some gray areas, maybe a past question you've been going through, or maybe general questions that you have, I've also seen some prospective students who are interacting with this kind of session for the first time. So I'm saying, if you have a question, just use the raise hand icon now so that I can see that you want to ask a question, and I would invite you to speak, and we'll do this in a very orderly manner. So I'm looking through to see those of us that have our hands up, and we'll take those questions. But while you're probably writing your questions down, if you don't want to speak or you're not in a place where you can speak, you can also type your question in the chat, and I'll read it out for speakers to attempt to answer them. But there's something I wanted to highlight that Mr. Obina spoke to that I think is important, that I probably also add based on my own experience. You know, there are times when you approach the ICSAN exams and you look through the questions from questions 1 to 5, and you realize that you know question 5 very well, but then question 1 is not so strong, and you feel like, oh, it's question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have to answer question 1 first before I get to the question 5 I know it so well. One thing you should know is that at the front of the exam booklets, there's a provision for you to indicate the order in which you answer the questions. So what I typically always do is I always put my best foot forward. So what it means is that question 5 I know so well that I can write and I will earn my full marks. I start with question 5. So it's not a question of, oh, I know only question 5. I wait till I've attempted 1, 2, 3 that I'm not so strong at, and then I'll go to question 5 and I write it well. Think like the examiner. The examiner is a human being. If he reads through question 1, 2 that you're struggling a bit, there is the presumption that this person does not even know, this person is not prepared for the exams. Meanwhile, your question 5 is the last one that you've done so well. He will naturally be conditioned to think that the rest of it wouldn't be as great, because the first 2 he or she has read, that's just psychology, okay? So what I would always do is, if I know question 5 very well, so I answer my questions in the order of strength that my answers are. I'm sure we gets what I'm trying to explain. So if my question 5, I can write it so well and I know I'm going to get my full marks. Let's start to question 5. Even if question 5 is the last in the order of arrangements for the questions. So once I'm done, if I do question 5, question 1, and question 3, because that's the order I know the answers very well, I just go to the front of the booklet and write it in that order. And the examiner will clearly know that that is the order you have answered it. The idea is putting your best foot forward so that you have an opportunity to really impress or come across as somebody who is really, really prepared. So by the time he or she gets to the ones where you are struggling a bit, you probably already earned your strong marks and you've crossed 50 and you've passed. So that's one thing I want to highlight so that we're not thinking, oh, it's question 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I have to answer it in that order. However, the questions that you have a very good understanding in is probably the last one. So ensure that you answer your questions in the order of strength for the answers and just put it in that order, whichever way it is. If you know question 1, 5, and 3, write it like that, but always indicate in the front of the booklet the order in which you have answered those questions so that you're putting your best foot forward and you're giving the psychology of the examiner would know that, yes, this person is prepared and he or she will gladly, because the marking is actually conference marking. So these examiners don't know you. They gather people from parts of Nigeria who are a body of markers. They have the marking scheme. So once you are able to answer those questions based on what is expected of a typical winning answer for that particular question, you earn your marks. So I'm basically saying they are human beings like you. So if you leverage on that psychology and you answer your questions in that order, it gives you a better advantage to earn your marks and pass. I'm not seeing any hands up yet. Does it mean we don't have any questions? We're thinking it through. Or if you don't have questions, if you have comments, if you also have probably you've written an exam before, maybe CA and you passed. Okay, I have a question here. Agnes Ojo is asking, I am writing on corporate secretaryships and okay, that's not even a question, that's a comment. Okay, that's not a question. She's saying she's writing corporate secretary and she's praying for robust understanding. Okay, Agnes, your God will answer your prayer in Jesus' name. All right, do we have any questions? If you're just joining, you can use the chat box to introduce yourself. Let us know your name, where you're connecting from, and the courses you are intending to write in December, or if you're just a prospective student who is trying to know more. We are done with the session in terms of the presentation by 2 speakers. We're currently taking open questions at this stage. Okay. I'm seeing more comments. Let me just read them through. Gabriel of Young is saying, thank you for the session. My question had to do with answering in exam. In terms of expression, can we answer questions by not giving definitions exactly the way we are given in the manual? And Mrs. Mbana and Mr. Obina, there's a question here. You can both speak to it. Gabriel of Young is asking, is it possible to give expressions to definitions, even though it's not the same with what is in the manual? Then we have another question from someone who is Samsung. We can't see the name, is your device name, but he says, please ma, I am confused on the difference between a receiver and a liquidator. Okay, that's another question. I'm just going to read them also. When I invite Mrs. Mbana and Mr. Obina, you can take them. Future is saying, thank you to the organizers. I would like to know if there's a way to get past questions from 2020 to 2023. Okay. Okay, so those are the 2 questions. The first I mentioned, Mr. Gabriel is asking if it is possible to give expressions to definitions, even though it's not exactly the way it's stated in the study pack. The other question is the individual wants to know the difference between a receiver and a liquidator. Okay, Mrs. Simbano and Mr. Obina, you have the floor. You can respond to these questions, please. Thank you.
Okay, let me talk about definitions. I don't think it's absolutely necessary to cram definitions, if that's what you're asking. But I am convinced that you need to understand it in such a way that you can communicate the meaning back to your examiner with good language, I hope. But the more your language is similar to the definition there in the manual, the better for you. But you must not put every is and as into it. But you must understand it in such a way that you can reproduce the definition in a way that the examiner likes. That is my position on that. I think two people asked the same question. So this should go for the two. That's my 2 cents. Thank you, Celine.
Okay, Mr. Obina, you have the floor. You can respond as well.
Okay. Well, like Mrs. Simbana said, if you have what the manual says, is good for you. But if you have read wide, that's okay. You understand, you can convey your thoughts adequately. You're not running around in circles. That's okay, because as long as you have the essence of what the question is all about, that's what I keep saying. Like, if it's governance is living, it's breathing. So if you have deep understanding of the subject and you can convey your thoughts adequately, that's okay. The second question with respect to receivership, a receiver and a liquidator, I think you need to look at it. There are differences. Of course, they're basically different. They are different in their roles, how they are appointed, their powers, and the focus of what they're expected to do. Because a receiver is appointed to take control of specific assets or properties of the company in question for a specific purpose. And most times is to recover debts that the company is owing to a secured creditor. So it's done most times. It's where a loan agreement is breached by a company, you can apply for receivership, and then they're appointed by secured creditors. They have the power, the authority to manage and dispose of designated assets, but do not have the authority to liquidate the entire company. So they are there. They act as receivers to receive what is owed by carrying out certain functions, and their primary focus is on the specific assets for which they were appointed. But when you're talking about a liquidator, you're talking about someone who is appointed to wind up the affairs of the company, as the name implies, to liquidate, to wind up the affairs of the company and distribute its assets to all the creditors, and at the end of the day, dissolve the company. So a liquidator is there to bring about the demise, to ensure that a company comes to its conclusive demise, but ensuring that the creditors are taken care of. And they are appointed during voluntary or compulsory liquidations, where the company is deemed insolvent, because insolvency most times is an issue, or they're unable to pay their debts. And of course, the liquidator's powers are much broader than the receiver's powers, because they are responsible for overseeing the entire liquidation process. And that includes all the company's assets, settling creditors' claims, distributing whatever remains to the shareholders, who are the last to receive of anything. And of course, the focus of the liquidators is to ensure a fair distribution of the assets among creditors, in accordance with insolvency laws. So that's the basic difference between the receiver and the liquidator. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Obina, for that very instructive answer. Okay, we have another question again from Mr. Gabriel, and he says, in one of the past questions, I came across the word captive insurance company, but I didn't see this I didn't see that in the study material. Can you share more light into this? This is corporate administration. Mrs. Mbano, did you hear the question? Mr. Gabriel is asking that he came across the word captive insurance company, but he didn't find any text about that subject matter in the study materials. Can you throw a bit more light about that subject area, captive insurance company? Mrs. Mbano, please. Hello? I don't think I can see her.
Okay, let me just, I keep telling most of our students that most times, as the name implies, that's the best way to try to remember some of these things. Because when you're talking about the captive insurance company, you're talking about an insurance company that is basically wholly owned and controlled by its insured, the people that it insures. So the insureds are usually maybe companies, businesses who use in the insurance company is held captive. So they use the captive insurance company to provide coverage for their own risks instead of seeking coverage from other, external traditional insurers. So they create their captive insurance company to retain the risks themselves. So the insured are the ones who control. Hello. So the insured are the ones who own and control the insurance, the insurance company. Is that clear?
Gabriel, I hope that response is appropriate. Is it clear? If it is, just you can respond. You can let us know in the chat. Okay. There's another question from, yes, okay, that's good. Thank you. There's another question from Oluwaseun, and she says, he or she says, in this year June date, I came across a question on 4 series in an asset register. And this is not in the study material. Can you explain? 4 series in an asset register. Oluwaseun, you did not indicate the course area.
So sorry. I don't know what happened. Sorry,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Did you get the question?
Yes. Did you say captive insurance?
Yes, that's what he said.
Okay. Okay, a captive insurance is a subsidiary of an insurance company, of a company, and what it is established, like company establishes that captive insurance, what he calls a captive insurance, for the purpose of underwriting all the risks of that company. That is, instead of going to the public or general insurance company to underwrite their risk, they set up their own insurance company and make it captive in the sense that all it does is to underwrite the risk of its parent company. So that's what it does. So a organization like, let's say First Bank can have its own insurance company, and it's not for general public, just to underwrite its own risk. That's what a captive insurance is. So it's the advantage is that that way, if there are some organizations that don't agree to underwrite that risk, then that captive insurance can do it for them. The parent company now can benefit from any premium that is paid because it's not competing with the public. It can retain its own profits, and it can bear risks that other insurance company may not agree to bear for it. It's just that it's disadvantageous in the sense that they may not be able to meet some major claims or accidents that they have because it's self-funded. So that is what a captive insurance is. I don't know what note you're using that you don't have it, but it's a very important aspect of insurance which you should have. You can DM me later. We could talk later, so you can have more of that material for that if you're interested.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Simba. Now, on the same breath, we have another question in the area of corporate administration as well. Oluwaseun is asking that she came across a question on entries in an asset register.
Okay.
So she wanted you to trade a bit more light, because she said she also did not find anything on that subject matter in her study materials. So can you just tell us a bit about? Yeah.
Okay, what materials are you using now? Okay, an asset register is under facilities management. It's a register where all the assets in an organization is recorded. Because we know that facility management is about managing all the assets of the organization, its land, its buildings, shops, offices, fleets of cars for a large corporate organization. So that asset register, it has details, the categories of details that it should have. I know that question. It talks about its reference number. So that asset may have a reference number. You see some asset, the fridge or the AC, there's a number there. It's supposed to be, it's kept there to record in the asset register for to secure that property. The asset type, if it's a car or a building, the location, which branch, the basic description, the day it was purchased, the insurance value, the supplier's details, things like that. You have about 10, 12 columns for that asset register. So you should have, it's usually contained there so that you have a good cover of that register for that asset for protecting it. So I don't know the note you're using. You can also DM me, talk to me later, and can supply you with notes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Simbano, for that response. Okay, Beauty, we've seen your comments. Graciously, there's a recording for this session, so it's going to be available on YouTube, and we'll have the link circulated so you can watch it again when it's live. Okay, so someone asked a question about getting past questions 2020 to 2023. What I would do, all those information and resources is available on our community platform. So I would probably share the link to join the community, and you can have access to all that information. I'm going to ask the facilitators. Someone has been asking for contacts. Mr. Obin and Mrs. Simbano, please, you can share your contact details for further engagements by our participants. Yes, I'm going to share it shortly before we end the session.
I think quickly, someone asked the difference between subscribers and members of the
Oh,
company.
yes, I missed that. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mr. Obina. Do you want to take it? Okay, please.
Okay, just very quickly. So the difference between subscribers and members, the first basically is the timing, because subscribers commit to shares during the company's formation. They're the first people that commit to shares while the company is being formed, while members have completed the registration process and are already actively part of the company. Then the subscribers basically don't enjoy full rights of membership until the company is registered. So subscribers come into the picture before the company is registered, and then they become official members. And then members have legal obligations and duties within the company because they are members of the company, while subscribers' responsibilities are basically limited to their initial subscription commitment. So the subscribers are different. Subscribers eventually almost always go on to become members, or not all members start off as subscribers, and a subscriber may decide not to go on to become a member somewhere along the line at the end of the day. So they're quite different.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Obina, for that explanation. I believe it's clear. I think it's Irene that asked that question. I almost missed out on it. Okay, Oluwaseun is also asking, please, this will be the final question because we've spent an hour at 5 minutes, so we will be wrapping up the session. This will be the last question, please. If you have any further questions, I've asked the speakers to put their contacts in the chat box so you can reach out to them. Okay, so let me read the question from Oluwaseun. It says there's a question on determining if the shares of a company is overvalued or undervalued in strategic financial management. The market value of the shares was not given. Please explain how to determine this. Mr. Obin, I'm sure you've still seen the question. Is that something you can respond to, even though it's
yeah, let me look at the question.
Valuation or undervaluation of shares. She says there's a question she found about that. Is that a subject area you can speak to or enlighten Oluwaseun a bit on?
No, I won't be able to help with this at this point, no.
Okay.
But is this question complete? Determine the question, if the shares of a company is overvalued or undervalued in strategic financial management. The market value of the shares was not given.
Yes, that's what she's saying. So I think she's trying to understand how to determine the market value of the shares.
Yes.
Or how, yeah, so the question appears to be incomplete.
Yes, that's the question. That's the challenge.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I'm trying to, okay, Oluwaseun says, no, there was no other data given. I want to know how to determine the share value. Okay. So I think in that scenario, there are times when, okay, let me just probably give a background. Prior to now, there's something called an ICSAN examiner's marking scheme. Before 2016, that marking scheme used to be published to the general public, usually produced in a book format and made available. It was sold. But after 2016, the institute stopped producing the marking scheme. So what the marking scheme really does is the manual that guides the examiners on the marks or the kind of answers that they expect of students for each exam diet. So the marking scheme did two things. I have to confess, I leveraged a lot on the marking scheme because I realized that the marking scheme is a guide for the assessment of the exams by the examiners. So that's what the examiners use to evaluate your responses. So when at the time I was writing ICSAN exams, the marking scheme was very much available and it was current. It was published at the end of every diet. So it gave a guide on what the examiners expect of any typical answer per question. So I'm mentioning this for two reasons. The first is, if this particular question appeared in an exam that was before 2016, the marking scheme would have highlighted that there was an error in this question and also provided that either that would have probably been a discounted question or it would have given guidance on what students would have, how students would have approached that particular question. So the marking scheme would have clearly shown what was expected to be the response or the answer for that particular question. But since 2016, we no longer have that. The institute has stopped publishing marking schemes. The second thing is, even though the curriculum has changed, okay, in terms of the name, the content, there are some fundamental topical areas in the curriculum that haven't really changed. So if you look at things like financial accounting, for instance, that's for people who are doing professional part one, you can still leverage on the marking scheme because those subject areas, the course content wouldn't have changed over time. So I'm saying this to encourage people to go back to probably from 2011 up to 2016. If you can have access to the marking scheme, please read them as well, because it also help you to see how the answer should be based on the expectation of the institute and the guide that the institute gives to examiners. And it will also help you to really understand how to couch your questions in a way that you actually deliver exactly what the examiners expect without too much literature. So you just see what the examiner expects your answer to contain. This will also be a guide for the question on the type of definition that you should provide. So if you read the marking scheme, you can clearly see the expectation of the examiners, and it will guide you in tailoring your answers when you are approaching the ICSAN exam. I hope this provides some insight. For the marking scheme in the community, I think we have some of the marking schemes for 2011 up to maybe 2 to 3 years. I'm not certain, but I know that we have the marking scheme there. I'm trying to copy the link. I'll post it before we close out on this session. Beauty is saying, please, under corporate law, is it mandatory to be mentioning referencing and sections? Mr. Obina, let's just take, because Beauty joined late and this is probably important for her. Her question is, under corporate law, is it mandatory to be referencing or mentioning the sections and numbers? If yes, what easy tips can you give in order to easily recall when required? Mr. Obina, do you want to just jump on this, or Mrs. Mbano, or any of you?
I think that even if you don't give the section, but you're able to state exactly what that law is, you would you scale through. But if you trying to remember the section, I think nobody can really do that for you. So instead of making mistake with a section, if you're not sure, it's better not to cite a section that you're not sure about. So you stick to the ones that you can easily remember. And the ones that you cannot remember, you state what Kama said. Kama provides that, and you state it. You will fail if you cite a wrong section, that's for sure. That's my take on it.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Mbana. I think that is quite clear. The most important thing is to appropriately state the content of the legislation, even if you cannot remember the section. If you can, then fantastic, you would get your full marks. But if you can't, ensure that whatever part of the law you are reproducing, you understand it and you can state it clearly without any mistakes. Okay, I've finally shared the link to join the community. Mrs. Simbano and Mr. Obina are also facilitators of a study center that is located in Port Harcourt. They also run virtual classes. So please feel free to engage with them. They've shared their contacts. You can reach out to them. If you have gaps in your notes, obviously, from the conversations we've had, there's some people who have access to study notes that aren't really fully covered. So this is an opportunity for you to reach out to them and ensure that you have access to the right study materials. So their numbers they've shared their numbers. I think I've seen Ms. Mbano share hers. Mr. Obina, you can do well to share yours as well. The link to the community, the Telegram community is also, I've posted it. So you can just click to join the community and you'll be admitted into the community. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I thought, all right. Okay, so at this point, I would like to draw the curtain to a close. It's been an hour and a few minutes time well spent. Thank you all for coming. I have to really thank our facilitator, Mrs. Mbano and Mr. Obina, for coming to share their wealth of experience with us. It's been a very enlightening session. I'm sure a lot of us are going home with value. I can see a lot of our community members here. Omolola Deyemi, she's among the very first people that joined the community. Omolola is not a lawyer, but she's been so strong and determined to get her ICSAN qualification through. So shout out to you, Omolola. And she's always canvassing for members to join because it's been a lot of value for her. I can't see any other person. Some of you are using device names, so I may not. Okay, yes, Okay to Lish is also here. Okay to Lish is a member of our community as well. Very strong member too. Okay to Lish is a lawyer and she's been on her journey for a while now, keeping at it. The truth is, it depends on how your strategy for writing your ICSAN exams. I personally, when I was writing my ICSAN exams, I had a very tough job. I was working Mondays to Saturdays, so I didn't even have time to register at a study center to take lectures. So I advised myself that I should be taking the exams one per diet, and that was how I wrote till I qualified. So if you're taking one per diet, your journey may be longer. If you are brave, like another community member that wrote the exams in June, Aisha took the 4 exams at once in one sitting and she passed all. So we have some very brave people who would say, no, I don't want to take it that long, and they write all 4 at once. So please, I believe you understand yourself. The most important thing is to walk at your pace. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And it doesn't even end at the exams. After you qualify, there's still a process of continuous development, continuous education that helps you to sharpen your skills as a professional in the industry. So thank you so much to everyone for joining. Mr. Obina shared his contact as well. The community link is also there. Mrs. Mbano is shared her contacts. And for those of you who joined late, don't worry, the session was recorded. If you join the community now, we would be able to get access to the.
Thank you, ma'am.
It's gone off.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good
Feli?
night.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Who is on?
Good night. Thank you for the session. I appreciate you all.
Hello, everyone. I'm okay too. I think we can end the meeting at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.